Hello, everyone. I am Michael Steelman, Director of Alumni Career Management and Professional Networks for William & Mary, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to our second event of Diverse Voices in Hollywood series, a discussion focused on diversity in the arts and entertainment industry and the importance of amplifying voices of diverse and underrepresented artists and creators. Today's discussion will focus on Asian Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, Southwest Asian voices in Hollywood, and is a partnership between William & Mary's Global Film Festival, William & Mary's APIM alumni, the Asian Centennial at William & Mary, and our William & Mary professional networks under the William & Mary Alumni Association. It takes a team of colleagues to pull together events like this, and I want to acknowledge and say thanks to two amazing colleagues, actually three amazing colleagues. First, Craig Anzalone, William & Mary's Senior Director for the West Coast, who has been instrumental in helping us bring together alumni leaders in the arts and entertainment industry. Next, I want to thank Ivana Marshall, Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement and Inclusion Initiatives. Ivana serves as the staff liaison to the WM APIM alumni. And Ivana is also a member of the planning committee for the Asian Centennial here at William & Mary and has helped really bring this program to fruition. Last but not least, I want to recognize my colleague Elizabeth Crawford, Senior Assistant Director for Regional Engagement and Professional Network Initiatives, for her expertise and leadership on marketing and managing today's program. Just a few housekeeping items for the technology as a reminder. I'm sure you all are well versed on these by now, but today's session will be recorded and we will notify all of our registrants once the recording is now then posted on wmalumni.com. Questions are welcome and we will moderate the questions throughout. But if you roll over the bottom portion of the Zoom window, you should see a Q&A icon appear. And please use that feature to submit questions. And if there's time, we'll try to address as many questions as we can. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our panel and moderator. We provided in our email reminders and on the website registration page a complete bio for each of the speakers. So for the interest of time, I'll do a quick rundown of their brief backgrounds really quickly. So first we have TV writer and producer Franklin Jinro, class of 1996 alumnus. Next we have TV writer and producer and alumna class of 2006, Chitra Sampath. And then last but not least, we have head of film at Marginal Media Works and a class of 2000 alumnus, Milan Chakraborty. This terrific panel will be moderated by our WM professor, Francis Aguas. In 2020, Professor Aguas founded the Aguas Arts Inc., an arts production company with a view to diversifying imaginations and creative landscapes. As a university administrator, Professor Aguas is the founding director emeritus of Asian and Pacific Islander American Studies, and he is currently the coordinator of the Global Studies programs, as well as the co-chair of the Asian Centennial at William & Mary. We are truly delighted to have Chitra, Milan, Franklin, and Professor Aguas join us today. Professor Aguas, please take it away.
Thank you, Michael. A very good afternoon to everyone. Good evening for those of you on the East Coast. It's my pleasure to be here. And thank you to the Alumni Association for having me here and for hosting this wonderful program. I thank our panelists in advance. All of us are alumni of somewhere, and it takes special people to continue to give back to their community. And that is typically William & Mary people behavior. So we're very grateful. I want to start us off tonight by asking our panelists one by one to kick us off by sharing their origin story. Look back to that pivotal moment in your individual stories that took you to this very moment. And in a way, probably is what keeps you going to where you want to go. So who wants to start us off? Franklin, would you like to start?
Sure, I'll kick it off. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, in the suburbs, and I was very much a kid of the 80s. My parents were Korean immigrants, and my dad was someone profoundly influential in my life. And one of the ways he inadvertently influenced me was he was really into electronics and gadgets. And so he had a bunch of stuff that was lying around, including camcorders, and he also had this weird eclectic taste in movies. And so he would bring home movies all the time, and a lot of which were frankly inappropriate, and this is, and I know other people who've had this experience where family movie night was going out to see just strange odds and ends because there was no filter, it was just like, oh, that movie sounds good, let's go see it. And so we'd go see movies like Silence of the Lambs and RoboCop as like kind of like family movies, but inadvertently that also fostered this love of movies that were out there that felt very personal and interesting, especially a lot of the movies that came out of the 70s, like the Scorsese flicks and so forth, and Coppola. And that gave me a love for like storytelling, and it just like, it made me think, and somewhere in there, I realized someone had to be making this stuff, and it inspired me. And coming out of college, the best thing that happened while I was at William & Mary, and I could speak to this, is that I was a abysmal failure as a student. And so I had no idea what I could do, like, to make a buck. And I said, well, I'll go for broke and just try this filmmaking thing. And so I had nothing left to lose, and I tried it out, and it just kind of stuck. And it took a while to get to where I am, but that's the basic gist of how I got here.
Now, I have a feeling, of course, that storytelling and visibility and, being visible to community will be an ongoing theme tonight. Chitra, would you like to continue us off?
Sure. I didn't really have clarity of vision that the job I have now was even a job. I spent a ton of my childhood watching TV, but it always felt like an escape. And so when I got to William & Mary, I was in the business school, but I was also in the closest thing we had to a film program there, which was part of literary and cultural studies. But even that, it felt like a hobby. It didn't feel like that could be my real job. But my whole life I was writing, my whole life I was watching television. And then when I graduated from William & Mary, I was a business consultant at Accenture for like 6 months. And I mostly did it because I was able to get them to move me out to Los Angeles. And I got out to LA, and I wasn't actually living in LA. I was living in El Segundo, which is way far south of LA. It's not part of Hollywood at all. And I think I thought I would go work for this business consulting firm in their media and entertainment practice. And somewhere, I guess, in the back of my head, it was all percolating that I was creating a path for me to get into entertainment, but I wasn't very conscious about it. And after 6 months of working at this consulting firm, I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I quit really without a plan. And I just started getting Craigslist PA gigs. And I went from being a paid business consultant who had never had an unpaid internship to taking unpaid internships a couple years out of college. And as I interned at reality TV companies, and then I interned in a writer's room. And I remember the first just 30 minutes of sitting in the writer's room of this show on TNT called Saving Grace. And I had never loved anything more. And I remember thinking in that moment, I don't even care if I ever get a job at this. If I can just get someone to let me keep interning a couple days a week for the rest of my life, I would be happy. And it all clicked then that that's what I needed to pursue. But I would say my real breakthrough moment, I was pursuing it. I was writing scripts. Back then you did this thing, you would write these things called spec scripts, which are just sample episodes of shows that already exist. It wasn't really normal for people to write pilots when they were trying to break in. So I was writing a lot of stuff that was modeled off of everybody else's stories. And I wasn't actually getting very far. Agents would like it and then not like it. And I wasn't really, and nothing was really happening. And so I thought I was sort of failing at this. And then I was on a plane home from India. My sister had had an arranged marriage, which was something that was already a little controversial and difficult and emotional to deal with. And I was flying home from that. And I just pulled out my computer and I just started typing something. And I didn't even really know what it was. And it ended up being a short film script. And that script to this day is still the piece of material that people read the most. And it was just me like really writing about my experience, like the very specific experience of coming from an Indian family in West Virginia, of being young girls who were raised here, who are expected to get arranged marriages, the immigrant story of my mom and the burdens of Indian women transferring, the burdens that Indian women transfer back and forth between each other, just like this very specific story that was so about who I am and my experience. And that's what ended up launching my career. And to this day, people still read that script, and I still get jobs off of that. So the authenticity of that, I think, was the breakthrough for me that I still live with today.
Absolutely. It was Hamlet, to thine own self be true. And we have to go back to your very first section there where you said you just felt so happy doing it that you couldn't believe that you could you were willing to intern for it, and that time had gone so quickly, right? And you're right, it's the authenticity that at some point I thought you were going to say that something was starting to hurt your soul. That's why you had to leave it. It's an expression I've heard people getting out from careers they're not happy in, that it hurt their soul so that they had to leave. So it's a good thing it didn't get to that point, but that you were able to return to what truly made you happy. And it really is expressing your uniqueness, right? What about you, Milan?
This has been great to hear the origin story. So thanks for sharing. I'm going to tell this story a little bit differently since it's with the William Mary community. Look, like an Indian from Indiana that was an accounting major, like you don't even dare to dream to be a part of the film industry. If you can see it, you can be it. I'm sure I'll say that more times. But, I graduated in 2000. So a couple, tragic things happened in the years later, September 11th, 2001, two of my close friends, also William Mary graduates, were killed in September 11th. And, I was an accounting major, as safe a job as you could possibly have. I took a job with the biggest, most prestigious accounting firm in the world, which was Arthur Andersen, Accenture. Me and 27,000 people lost their job in 2002 because of the Enron scandal. So everything I thought was, not permanent, but we work till we're 65 and then we enjoy life, was just shattered. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I needed to focus more on being happy today than hoping I could be happy at 65. And so I started a job with AOL Time Warner, worked with Time Warner Cable for 2 years as they were launching video on demand. I never knew how important that would be to my life in the future. And then, as I went, and then I asked for a transfer out to, we had a conference out in LA, and I met up with a bunch of my, William Mary plays a special part in all my stories. Last year, it would have been 18 out of 20 years I've been back to Homecoming, but I met up with a bunch of my friends, and they were making less money than all my friends on the East Coast, but they were loving it. And I was like, I thought there's something to that. So I asked for a transfer out to our LA office. And the first film project they sent me to was first film set, Batman Begins in London, and then Superman Returns Australia, V for Vendetta Germany. And that's when I started daring to dream. I was like, what could I possibly do? And I really focused in on the producing role as a nice mix of the business side and working together. And also in your 20s, you have this different realization and respect, or at least I did, of understanding how my parents got here from two villages in India. And I wanted to take a commensurate risk. I wanted to take a big risk like they took. So at 29, I left at January 31st, 2008, left corporate America, and 4 months later was producing my first film on Sunset, in the middle of Hollywood, and here we are 20 films later, 13 years later, and still doing it. Literally every film I've done, somebody from William Mary has been involved in some capacity.
What I'm hearing from your story, thank you, Milan. What I'm hearing from your story is this sense of curiosity and adventure, right? To do something new. But I also want to honor what you've brought into the conversation, which is very timely, in terms of the trials of being diverse and minoritized citizens, people, not only in the industry, but in the world, right? Liminality is LCST word. I was a very proud member of Literary and Cultural Studies, Chitra, and to this day, even with film studies, I miss having an LCST program. I think, that's another conversation, but I think what Milan has brought us to is this notion of liminality, right? And this is in all your stories, being in between spaces. We go to our home countries and we're American. And then we come here, we're from that place. So how did the industry treat you? What has your experience been like? And to be more specific, we all know that the industry is based on relationships. Anything is based on relationship, AKA networks, right? So as you tell us about your journey into the nitty gritty of it, particularly in light first of Black Lives Matter, and then at some point, I'm sure you all have followed the story that in the Asian community, part of our own reckoning was, the generational divides between race as a concept in Asian, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, Southwest Asian American communities, that Black Lives Matters didn't receive the same reception or perception within our own communities. And through all of that is your craft, media, icon making, right? So I think if we want to, you can address it however which way you want, but how did Black Lives Matter, the reckoning with racial justice within our community, and then COVID happened, and then Stop Asian Hate, Atlanta happened, right? As you sort of matriculated in the industry, how do these seismic shifts impact you on a daily basis through the years? How have they impacted you through the years? Anytime there's a societal sort of earthquake, what happens to people like you in the industry?
I'll jump in first, I guess, on that, because I think my lens, I think a lot of people share sort of a similar trajectory that I have. I don't know how much it overlaps with Chitra's and Milan's, but like I grew up very much like with a assimilationist mindset. Like I grew up in the suburbs, and it's like most of my friends were white, and like it was firm Reagan country where I grew up, and it was there's a notion of I think that sort of bootstrap American dream that was very much a part of the fabric there, and I certainly bought into that. And I think it was like my focus was so much on fitting in and like kind of being in that sort of 80s bubble, and it wasn't really until, and look, I was always aware that I was Korean and I was different in a lot of different ways, but it wasn't really until I think after college, in fact, that I really started thinking about these things in a very different context, and it wasn't like I feel like in honestly, the ways that we depict this on screen and in literature, was all messed up like for so long until we were able to tell our stories, because it's like, that's not the reality was never reflected in the way it was depicted on screen, in terms of like how, race presented itself, it's a much more devious and sort of, I think a tricky thing than that. And so for me, the story I told my wife recently was like, I was in film school and, I was oblivious to a lot of these matters until like my screenwriting teacher said to me, well, things are going to be harder for you. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, because you're Asian. And I was like, what do you mean? And she wasn't saying it in a way that was just like, you're, lesser than, but it was just sort of like, she understood the reality. She was someone who was very well known in the sci-fi community because she was a woman writing sci-fi at a time when it was entirely a boys' club, And so that was the first time I was like, oh, this journey that I'm about to go on out of film school is going to be different, and the problem is, I would dare say 95% of the time, you have no idea when you're being discriminated against, you don't know if you're not getting jobs because of race or gender or whatever it is, because you're not privy to those conversations. Now, in my case, like I came at the business like entirely, and I think maybe both Milan and Chitra relate to this. Like I had no connections. I didn't know how to navigate the way. When I was coming in, the internet was barely a thing, So it's like the resources that are available now, and it's incredible. It really is. Like the amount of free education you can get now. It's like there's no reason to go to film school. That's a separate conversation, but there's so much great free info via podcasts, via like writers on social media, like like it's all there if you want to get into the business, and whether it's as a writer or as a producer like Milan, or like like as an agent, like there's so many different ways in, when I was in school, I had no idea, like not even a clue. And I think that's partly, part of this larger conversation about privilege, about access, about networks, and so, and then also my own sort of individual sort of wonkiness kind of made it a trickier journey to get to where I am. But I will say it's sort of, in some ways, the way I look at the TV side of things, at least, and slowly but surely the feature side, is that things have changed so much in the past, like 3 to 10 years, and I think it's accelerating even now in terms of the type of content and opportunities that we have. And I'd love to hear both Chitra and Milan speak to this, but like the reality is, pre Crazy Rich Asians, there's no way I would have been able to pitch a lot of the stuff that I'm pitching now. Like not even, like it was just been like laughed out of the room, and or just died as a fantasy in my brain. Now, I mean, when Parasite won, I shed tears, with this past year with Nomadland and Minari doing so well and entering the public conscious and driving like Taste, it's also tears, right? So it's an exciting time, but it by no means is an easy time. Now, this doesn't address like all the traumas that we've been experiencing over the past year plus. It's exhausting. That's the short version. I'll say. I'll pass it off to Milan or Chitra, but I'm tired and it's hard. So.
Yeah, I actually would love to pick up after you because you landed on what I think is the biggest shift. So I came out of diversity writing programs, studio diversity writing programs. I was in the NBC program and the Fox program, and those programs have existed for a long time. And most of all of my jobs on staff, so I've spent the last 10 years mostly working for other people on their television shows as a writer and producer. And I'm just now transitioning to the place where I'm selling my own shows and I would be the boss on those shows. But most of my time on staff was as the only woman of color in the room, sometimes the only person of color in the room. And I was very much put there, it felt like for, I would say the first 5 or 6, 7 years I was on staff, it really just felt like I was filling a quota. And that's why I was placed there. It would be, oh, well, we have a cast that's got several people of color in it. So then the white showrunner and all of the white producers would be really, really pushed by the network to hire someone of color. And then I would end up in that position with people who were already kind of resentful that they had to hire me and didn't think that they needed me. So you're already a little bit set up. I was already a little bit set up for failure. I would spend probably the first month or two just trying to break through the barrier of getting people to understand that I can actually do the job. Whereas I would see a white guy of any age and of any experience walk through the door and immediately be listened to. I would have to just kind of push and push and push until eventually 6 weeks in, there'd be that one moment where someone finally looks at me and goes, oh, she does actually know how to do this. But the assumption when I walked in the room is that I was just the diversity hire and I didn't know how to do it. And so that would be the beginning experience of pretty much every show I was on until the last few years, because there's been this seismic shift that Franklin brought up, which is the industry has now realized that stories of color are profitable. That's the difference. They're profitable, and that they need us to tell them. And especially after the last year, they realized it looks really fucking bad if you try to tell them without us. And so unfortunately, it comes down to the money. I wish there was more goodwill involved, but it comes down to the money. But that's good for us because now what's happened is I have a tremendous amount of opportunity because there's not a lot of people who are of color that moved all the way up the ranks, and they're suddenly trying to make all of these television shows, but they don't have enough people to run them that are people of color. So there's this huge influx of material. So that's great for everyone who's on this call that's trying to enter the industry now. This is a great time to be entering the industry if you're a person of color. Because they want you and they're hungry for you and they need us. I think that's the biggest shift that I've seen, is that at first it was just kind of this performative quota system. And now it's real because we're legitimately needed. And there's still places that don't get it and they'll just like slot someone in and say, oh, we've got a person of color, and they don't take it seriously. But for the first time ever, I found myself able to really, like, I don't have to work with people who don't get it. That used to be something I had to do. You had to take the job on the show with a whole bunch of white people that didn't want you to be there because that's the only job. But now all of my projects, for the most part, it's other people of color who want to co-create with me. There's just so many more of us and so many more environments to do that. And I can be a lot more selective. So there's some positivity in terms of the business side and the opportunities for everyone right now.
Yeah, their answers were great. Biggest difference is I get asked to do a lot more panels, but only this month. So hopefully after June 1st, I still get invited to stuff. But 13 years ago, like when we were looking up to people, it just, you didn't know who to ask. I can't call M. Night Shyamalan, or I can't call Kal Penn, and now there's like that working middle class, and which is exciting. You're having a call, especially now with my company, a new company that I'm a part of, Marginal Media Works. It's like our whole mandate is underrepresented. So for the first time, the kinds of films I've wanted to make is my mandate, not just how can I try to make people with money more money, and every once in a while I'd sneak something in there like Plus One or something. But it's so cool, like the amount of Zooms I've done over the last year, and over 50% of us are either people of color or specifically Asian or South Asian. And that's been really exciting because I feel like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we'll look back and it's like, this is the first time I feel like in history, a lot of us Asians and South Asians, like, it's like, oh, we're not competing against each other. We're trained and raised to compete against each other. It's like, we're better and stronger together, and really being truer and better allies for each other, and not just within the Asian community, but all, people of color and other underrepresented groups. So it's like to add on to what Chitra was saying, there, as former consultants, like I can share in the chat, like it reminded me of an article that just came out. Literally, McKinsey, those nice people at McKinsey that people strive to get their job after college, they said Hollywood is losing $10 billion a year, and that's specifically talking about Black-led. So if you add under the umbrella other people of color, and that's how you really get affecting change. And the flip side of that is everybody supporting each other. Don't just buy the movies with superheroes unless Shang-Chi that's coming out, the first Asian Marvel superhero later this year. But we our vote is our dollar, our click is our vote, and that's how the ecosystem works. That's how we'll truly get the greenlighters to change, because as much as Crazy Rich Asians changed everything, it's like, oh, what's your Crazy Rich Asians? Then you'll pitch something and it'll sound exactly what they wanted, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I have another Asian project. A diaspora of like 2 billion people, like, you have another Asian project? Like, there's 9 projects on GameStop right now, active projects. That's a true story. Like, so we still have a lot of room to go. There's talking about the responses to Black Lives Matter. There was just a study or article that came out. Like, I think companies pledged like $50 billion that they were going to add to this cause. Like, and less than 50 million has actually been spent. It's like that. That's a big difference. And we really have to hold these companies and these panels, everything. It has to, the greenlighters have to change, and what they greenlight has to change to really create the pipeline. It shouldn't be Crazy Rich Asians or bust. Because every year on the TV side, how many failed white led pilots are there? But yet they keep giving them shots. But if one Indian pilot fails, they'll say nobody liked it.
Mhm.
We just want the chance to suck too. I agree with
Yes.
Milan.
Yes.
Well, imagine if Crazy Rich Asians flopped,
Oh, I
but
know. I've
but
thought
it
about that
didn't,
scenario.
right? But at the same time, something is different. I mean, all of you have pointed to this, right? Especially with social media, with what Asian Americans, the APM community, and we put the M at William and Mary. We're one of the first in the whole world to, by the way, use that term APM, because we are reclaiming Southwest Asia, which the Western world has started to call Middle East, because as you all know, William and Mary, folks that you are, that is an act of white imagination. It is Southwest Asia. Lebanese know they're Asian. So at William and Mary, we call our community APM, and we now use the word Southwest Asia. So, but that being said, of course, in the 70s, you had Julie Dash and Montezuma Esparza, and is it Charles Durning or Charles Barnett? The African-American filmmaker, right? I went to UCLA, that's my alma mater. In the 70s, Blaxploitation, Montezuma started making those films, and that was the Renaissance, right? In that team of UCLA alums was Robert Nakamura, Bob Nakamura, who did the film Manzanar. And of course, he went into documentary filmmaking, became a professor at UCLA, and he was my teacher. I bring this up because in terms of our diverse and minoritized communities, our storylines are so dependent on the approaches and focal points of pioneers like Nakamura, Esparza, Julie Dash, and I would put Mira Nair there, of course, even if she's not, quote unquote American. But Mira Nair doing Mississippi Masala in what, 88, 89, that was a beautiful film. It had Denzel. Denzel went everywhere, but Mira is Mira Nair. But Mira didn't make Crazy Rich something in the early 90s, but clearly something happened now. So my question is, clearly our people have done something on social media, right? Randall Park, You Offend Me, You Offend My Mother, Justin Lin, who is my classmate from UCLA, Quentin Lee, if you've ever heard of Quentin Lee, Margin Films, we're that generation in the 90s who were students of Bob and them. So my question is, you three are in this room right now, in this Zoom. What does the current APM Renaissance look like? We consider you visionaries, right? We've talked up to this point about what led you here and what you've had to deal with, right? You now are in a position where you have agency. Franklin was kind enough to join our graduation for the Asian American Studies program, which we do have at William and Mary. We graduated our largest class of 5. But you have agency, right? To us, to my students, you are Julie Dash, you are Montezuma Esparza, you are Mira Nair, you are Wayne Wang. Where do we go from here? How do we get there? What do you use the most from your community, from what your parents taught you, that you rely on the most, that you can be the path makers that you are now for the future?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think, and I'll speak to somebody who I think was pivotal for me, which is Spike Lee, right? Like, I mean, when he did She's Gotta Have It, and I remember, I don't even know how I saw these things, but it clearly had to introspect then. But, he spoke to just the process of making the movie, and also speaking to the fact that his classmate, Jim Jarmusch, had made this little movie called Stranger Than Paradise. And he was like, oh, I can make that, And, and that's why indie filmmaking, I think, appealed to me initially, because I was like, oh, this seems like a path that is realistic for me. It's like there was a real path there. Whereas like LA and the studio system, I mean, that was just, so far removed from anything I thought was even possible, And what Spike has done, of course, is he's lifted other people up, And I think that's something. So certainly, I think anyone in our generation, I've seen it amongst my peers and people I look up to, and I've benefited from, is like we help each other out, And I definitely look at that beyond just simply my identity as like a Korean American, but also like as a William & Mary grad. It's like we don't have a lot of people in the industry out here. So anytime I see anybody who went to William & Mary, and this is a good example of this, is I was working on the show Swamp Thing, and it's like it was a funky building. I think Chitra, you might have been in the same building at some point because did you worked on
Yeah, I
Gotham,
worked with
right?
the
Yeah,
same crew. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yes.
did 3 shows on those stages. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like, I mean, and so like, it's, you know, I was going to work one day and like, I noticed there was just a car and it had a little license plate and said College of William Mary. And I was like, holy shit. Like, it's like, you know, so I just stuck a little note underneath a windshield wiper. And it was the writer's assistant on Gotham, Ella Carol Smith, you know, and I just want to strike up a conversation because there's so few of us, you know? And so I think, there's some of us like of this generation are just like, look, and partially because I've been the beneficiary of other people's generosity. It's like, I just want to pay that forward. Right. So I think that's a huge part of it. And what's exciting for me, and you alluded to the fact that, you know, I attended the wonderful ceremony for the, you know, APIA studies. It's like, this next generation is so inspiring. They're so smart and savvy and so diverse in their interests and their backgrounds. It's like, it's not like this monolithic, like, I feel like my story is like, yeah, like my parents came over in the 70s and like, you know, like they owned a grocery store. And it's just like, I feel like my name could be swapped out with like 100,000 other people, you know? But now we have people come from all sorts of walks of life and bring a diversity of experience and worldview and interests that it's just like we're a diversity unto ourselves, you know? And that's exciting for me because it's just like, I live with myself 24/7. I don't need any more of that. I want to find other people where we have these sort of overlaps in our interests and our goals and how we want to move the needle and, you know, affect change, you know, but they're not me, which is exciting because, you know, I got enough of me. It's all good.
You know, I'm going to reference something Franklin was talking about with sometimes it it being exhausting because, you know, you said very nice things and you know, when Chloe Zhao is the first, you know, first Asian American woman, but for second woman to win, it's like we're still doing so many firsts and it's just like you know, our company Marginal, we'll do some identity stories, but we're trying to stay away from the exceptionalism or the extreme hardship as the only stories about us that need to be told. And you also, you know, you mentioned two films, Mississippi Masala, and it made you think like, well, yeah, Denzel, but where were Sarita Chaudhry's roles? You know, and let's go forward. Bend It Like Beckham, Keira Knightley, Rocket Ship. Where's Parminder Nagra's roles, right? And you know, still we face it in the community. It's like, oh, you have a South Asian project. How do you get Mindy Kaling or, you know, Priyanka Chopra to do it? And it's just like, and I appreciate and love everything they've done, but it's like we're trying to create that pipeline. And I know most of my answers have been very hopeful, and I'm still very hopeful. But I think understanding like and just asking these questions, why did this happen the way it happened, and how can we do it better in the future? And as you change the green lighters, as you change who's involved, so many times all I did is ask that extra question: can this character be South Asian? Can this character, you know, I did the first film with a national release to star a person with Down syndrome, but it wasn't a movie about Down syndrome, you know, and people really embraced it. So, you know, while I'm hopeful and the words you said were very kind, I hope it is a lot more normalized. So it's not so special. It's just what you expect.
Well, we do, thank you for that. We do have a question from the participants or audience about, you know, getting in and how do you get noticed if you don't get into diversity showcases or the fellowships that the studios do. By the way, if they're out there, one of our very own made it to, I don't want to promote any one of the studios, but the one that James Corden works at, I think one of ours made it in there. So that's very good news. But what if you don't make it into these showcase fellowships? How do you get your work noticed beyond the reader in the studios putting it in the dumpster?
Well, one thing I just want to say about the showcase fellowships, because I have a lot of experience with those that I don't think people know, is you get points for applying year after year after year. They do track who continues to apply, and all the people that run those programs, they talk to each other. So if you're doing the work and you're working on your writing and you keep applying every year, when your time comes, they work it out. So that's just one thing I want to say. Don't apply just 1 year and then get upset and not apply. Keep going, because you really are building momentum for yourself, getting those reads every year. The other thing I'll say is good scripts really do rise to the top eventually. They do. It is hard. It is hard. The best advice I can give you is be ready when the opportunity comes. I can't tell you how many times someone has asked me for a coffee. I've gone to the coffee. I have offered to read something, and then they never sent me anything because they weren't ready. So the best thing you can do is make sure your writing is ready. And then I would encourage you to find other people at your level. When I started out with a bunch of other interns and PAs. And I remember looking around and thinking, there's no way we're all going to make it. And the truth is, everyone who stayed and kept working and didn't give up, we're all working writers now. And now we're all graduating to showrunner together. So it's a little bit of a myth that it's truly a gamble. If you keep going at it and you're around, and there is in TV, there is a little bit of a personality thing. You do have to fit. You do have to be someone that people are going to want to sit in a writer's room with for 10 hours a day. But if you stick with it and you make other friends, make a writer's group of other people who are on the same path as you, support each other, and then that's how you start to build out your network. And eventually the right opportunity will come. I mean, I didn't get my manager by sending scripts to management companies. I got my manager because I had a friend who went to a party and met a manager. And then I got a drunk phone call saying I met someone and I convinced her to read your script. I had nothing to do with it. I had just been in LA building up genuine friendships, not like fake superficial network, but genuine friendships with people.
Yeah, I'd love to piggyback on like everything Chitra said is gold, like and 100% correct. And I can offer a little bit of a different sort of point of view because I didn't go through the diversity fellowships. I'm very involved with CAPE, which is it's an Asian Pacific entertainment group, and so it's a great entry point, and like they've been just a great supporter over the years. But when I got my breaks, it was through other random means, you know. But the commonality, I think, is that. First of all, it helps a lot if you're in LA or in a place where you can actually have sort of these happy intersections, right? Like, and that's why getting a job in any capacity is important, because you're just going to be more likely to meet people who are going to be the people that you just connect with and are your community. And I would definitely emphasize that word community. When I moved to LA, I'm part of the reason I went to film school is because I just wanted to meet some people because I knew nobody in Los Angeles, you know? And so I think it's about who are the people you're going to ride or die with over time. And Los Angeles is a giant city, and you will find people that you're going to connect with. You know, that's just the truth. And so whether it's coming in, say, like from the William & Mary alumni side, or whether it's film school, or whether it's just taking classes or workshops, you know, it is about the horizontal relationships, the people who are going to be that community as you find your way. And it doesn't have to be just writers. In fact, it shouldn't, because you'll go crazy if you just hang out with writers solely, or I would, you know. But it's about finding all the other people who are just going to be there looking out for each other and be true friends, you know, and colleagues. So, and I think more than ever, I mean, there's so many different entry points now, aside from the diversity fellowships, you know, and also just finding like entry level jobs like as PAs or whatever, but working internships at a production company or what have you, you know, like, but doing it, getting in, and then just like, again, seeing where water flows from there and being ready to flow like water is really important.
Yeah,
I appreciate the Bruce Lee. I appreciate Bruce Lee there. Flow like water, my brother. Go ahead. Go ahead, Milan.
When I first started, a friend of mine who was also a college roommate one year, he was my RAR when I was RA in Yates Basement, but he gave me advice like, give yourself 7 to 10 years to feel like you're heading in the right direction, not to make it, to feel like you're heading in the right direction. And remember, I started when I was 29, and I thought, not a chance. I'm going to be close to 40. Like, that's old. I'm 42 now. It's not old. And
that's like med school.
Yeah.
It's like you went to med school.
And it's one of those things he was 100% right, because it takes building your community, like they said, but last year, one of the projects I found it on Twitter. It costs nothing to amplify others and become a part of the conversation online. Social media can be an awful place, but I also found two writers for two development projects last year. And I also found a director purely through reaching out to my network. And if people played the long game or were good to each other, people love talking to others. And they're the experts on the TV side, but every major film festival has added indie episodic, which didn't exist, and Series Fest in Denver, Colorado, a place for independent TV, and acquisitions are happening. And statistically, you actually have a lot better chance if you make it than the film festival, because there's not as much competition. So those programs are great, but to piggyback, their answers were great. To piggyback, there are other outlets, but yeah, it's a job. A lot of people think it's just this fun, creative thing, but you got to put in the work, and which is great for the William & Mary alumni base. It's like we're trained for that.
As we wrap up the conversation, I wanted to ask you, first of all, to invite Junius, who asked the question. Thanks, you all. And we invite the audience to type in questions. But I'll ask my concluding sort of culminating question, just like you're defending your thesis. And that is, all of you have talked about resilience, overcoming adversity, being exhausted, right? That paradigm or that contradiction. How have you managed to stay resilient? How have you kept your shoulders healthy, right? I had to explain to my 16-year-old what a chip on the shoulder meant just yesterday. So how have you managed to be resilient? Is there something from, again, I go back to the home, to the family, to the community. Is there something distinct to our communities, to your upbringing, that you always return home to in the hardest day that can keep you in the game and keep you positive and healthy and humane and genuine?
Yeah, I'll come in the pause. It sounds cheesy and overly simplistic, but I think love and support is everything, and I think about the difficulties I've had, but I also think about just what an incredible hand I've had in terms of the love and support I've gotten from an amazing mom, a great sister, the friends I developed along the way, all through, one of the great things about where I grew up is I had the same group of friends, from K through 12, and some of them are still very much my extended family. I have an amazing wife who also William & Mary alum, who's she's believed in me from day one and stayed by my side with that belief, and that's not quantifiable, right? It's I think you need that. I think it's a necessity. I think this idea of especially in the filmmaking world, where it's lone wolf auteur is celebrated as this sort of paragon of excellence, which is it's nonsense. Every single person I know who's excelled has depended on so many others who believed in that person to get their name, the film by blank, it's which to me is nonsense. We ascribe individual greatness on these things when it's anything but, right? And that's not to diminish the great individuals out there, but I would say in my case, it's family and friends, and then also just the mentors. That's been a lifelong thing for me, is finding mentors who can teach me and point the way. That's worth its weight in gold. So I would say I'm grateful for all those elements, because without those things, I'd be adrift.
Yeah. Oh, good.
I was just gonna say, I think earlier Franklin started talking about assimilation, and I've spent a lot of this last year unpacking the ways that the South Asian American community was very quick to assimilate in the generations where my parents came over. And as I unpack all of that, I found myself like I've just started really getting into meditation, into Ayurveda, into more ancient South Asian practices that didn't really make the jump with my parents, that I didn't grow up with, that I wish I had had a connection to. And then I've also, a lot of it has just been having conversations with the other South Asian kids I grew up with. Like we had this, last Christmas was really interesting because all of us realized that we had just celebrated Christmas like it was normal, but we were supposed to be Indian, and no one had ever explained that conflict to us. And we had just lived our whole lives that way. And so and when we started to unpack it, we realized there were all these things about whiteness. Like there were certain girls that were like, wait, why do I only date white men? Where is that coming from? So just like having all of these conversations about our experiences and unpacking them when I think we weren't necessarily conscious about them. That's what I've been doing for the last year. And that's helped a lot because it's a lot of weight. I feel a lot of pressure now. I'm grateful that I'm in the right place to pitch shows about our experience, and people are just kind of happy to have someone who has experience that is like, okay, I can give you the show that you need to make money. And then I can hire a bunch of South Asian people to work on it. But it's also a tremendous amount of pressure. Like I'm just a TV writer. I'm not like a DNI expert, DIE expert or anything like that. I'm not like a professor in race studies. So it's a lot. And I just kind of take it day by day, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to the flip side of that because they nailed that. It's like, you know, we still feel imposter syndrome. It's impossible not to have it in this industry because you're wondering, even when you're on the highest mountain, on the highest high of you sold this, you sold that, you're wondering, how do we do it again? So sustainability is a huge, and viability is a huge issue. And, and that's where I think it becomes so important to be honest and sharing your journey. When I got this gig as head of film, like the amount of people that reached out, because I've shared my journey. I've told people how scared I am over the course of the years. But like, as Franklin said, that love and support of your friends and family, even if it's not necessarily financial, it's been just as important. If I need if I just, I think for a while, the special thanks is just people that gave me a couch for over a week over the course of the previous year. So yeah, the mental state and, understanding that you're playing a long game, and it's such a fine line that between ambition and delusion. And sometimes I questioned, am I on the wrong side of that line? But and that's where I think a Waymarried background is. I think through and through have an intense belief in ourselves, and thinking every day we were putting in the work and eventually it'd be recognized. And sometimes, it's weird because it's not a meritocracy. We've always succeeded in meritocracies. We're going to rise to the top. We've done it since we've been little kids. But Hollywood's not quite that, even though it does eventually rise to the top, and and they're getting better. But are we thinking every film that's made is the best scripts out there? Every director that's getting these gigs, are they the best directors out there? No. And so there's another game being played, and we're getting better at playing it. But I think it's okay it's an industry that will test your will. But I don't think there's another industry like it in the world. There's an old thing about the entertainment industry. If you can think about doing something else, do that, because it's not going to feel worth it otherwise.
Well, I want to go back there because, I was there until 2000. Milan, when you said it was, who was it who said, the 8 to 10 years when you're going the right path, not being better, right? It was Milan. At William and Mary, everyone's so strategic. Most people are very strategic, right? Like the sure thing is one of the Twampy qualities, right? What is the sure thing, right? Rate my professor, word of mouth on a class, right? Do your own market survey. So how do you advise? I mean, you already said one of them, which is if you can imagine doing something else, do that, right? Because you're definitely going to have to be invested. But that's in anything, right? I know engineers who I thought they were going to be more sustainable than me, and they love startups. So they were actually it felt like they were the ones in Hollywood because they kept doing startups, right? So what do you advise our next generation? Because they're the ones who at 10 years old knew what pansexuality was. They're the ones who know the word woke. They're the ones who grew up with the dichotomy or contradiction of Obama and the last guy, right? So what are the challenges for them? What do you foresee sort of in your Johnny Carson, sorry for being dated here, right? Johnny Carson had that crystal ball. Sorry, no one else other than those who are
Arnak,
alive.
I know exactly what you're referring to.
Right, I'm aging myself.
Yeah.
I'm not a millennial, I'm a Generation Z. But in your crystal ball, what are the challenges for the future, but what also is more unique and hopeful for them?
Well, I will say like the one thing that seems to come up, and I tried to offer this, and not like I'm some font of great wisdom, but I think the mistake a lot of people make, and from what I understand is the younger generation right now, is you want to curate your career. Like it's like you have to hit a certain bar, and like look, I get it. There's a lot of pressures right now, like the kind of financial and job pressures that exist right now are far more acute than what I think I faced and my peers faced coming out of college. But I do think it's really important to embrace, like referring back to the be like water thing, is like things are not going to go like you want them to, and that's a good thing. Be ready to pivot and just kind of run towards things. Like, I mean, my own career, I feel like this is one of the single greatest things I ever did was spend 5 years coaching ultimate frisbee for the USC women's ultimate team. It's like, I make no joke about it. It's like it was a bubble of time that I wouldn't swap out for any amount of money or career advancement. Now, I wish there had been a little more of the concurrent, like intersection of those in the Venn diagram of it all. But like, I loved it. And I learned so much about like how to lead, how to work within a team environment. And like, and I'd say go headlong towards things that you're going to love, that you're going to be able to do, and embrace failure too. Just like, don't be afraid to screw up and feel like you always have to do the right thing, So don't curate so much, just like go towards the things and like learn and live.
Yeah. I think I told you guys I quit Accenture after 6 months, and I think 6 months after that, everyone I was working with got laid off, and I actually had a more secure career at that point. I don't know. It's like Franklin said, you just have to roll with it, and be ready to pivot. One thing I'm really excited about that we haven't talked too much about is this next generation coming up. There's no gatekeeping of content. Like there was it was hard to make content when I first started, but you guys can just pull out your phone and make content right now. And I'll give you a specific example. There's some TikTokers who don't even know that I've been watching them with the intention of putting them in my show if it gets ordered to series, because they're young South Asian American TikTokers and they're killing it. And they have no idea that there's like some woman working on a Netflix show that's just like watching them and everything they put up there. But I've noticed them. So you guys can start making content right now. And even if that means you've got some other day job, like it's so much easier. So that I'm really excited about. I'm also really excited about the fact that it's so natural to kind of to everyone, whether they want to go in this profession or not, to sort of curate their voice and what that is. And I think the kind of content we're going to see is going to be really sophisticated, because we're raising a whole generation of people who have grown up making content as they were just living their lives. So I'm really excited to see what that turns into. And by the way, I have absolutely been on a show where we hired someone based on their tweets. Twitter is a great way to get noticed as a writer. So that's something that you guys can do right now as well.
Yeah, I think, I saw like a study came out recently, like 75% of young people want to become YouTubers and social media stars when they grow up. And, being from Indiana, I get a lot of like, hey, my son wants to be an actor. And I was like, well, do they want to be an actor or do they want to be famous? And understanding that it's a craft. So, the two things is don't expect the instant gratification. So much we get from, our phones and we're used to, I get it now. And, so I already gave the 7 to 10 year thing. And then the flip side to it is don't give up. It's going to test you. And it's such a simple, it's just a simple thing. Usually on my worst days over the last like 5 years, there's a little cartoon strip and a guy, there's two guys underneath the ground and they're digging for diamonds. And, one person is digging, he's got a long way to go. The other person is turned around and there's just a little sliver. They were almost there. So it's just like, don't give up, to have a more hopeful tone. And because it's like, it's an amazing thing. And as we're seeing, William Mary is way more than Glenn Close, Patton Oswalt, Jon Stewart, and Bill Lawrence.
I agree with you. Yeah.
We're all over the place now.
The three words that encapsulate for me this wonderful time together. First of all, I'm so grateful to be speaking with William and Mary students who can just be my friends, right? That you can call me Francis, not Professor, right? Because at some point I will be 80 years old and there will be grandchildren visiting me. But what captures this moment for me is an acronym, right? Like in marketing, it's an app. It's an app because authenticity, right? That is crucial. Know yourself, know what you're capable of, know who matters and what matters. Passion, you guys are beaming with that, but passion and authenticity are nothing without perseverance. And in there is resilience, is adaptability, is flexibility. So you all have all those three things. And I think the future is bright and we are so grateful. You continue to make us proud and we wish you well. You are role models. This conversation, I will show it in my class. I teach a class called Sex and Race in Plays and Films, nicknamed Sexy Racy. From scholars to actors to poets to performance artists smashing guitars after writing a poem on stage. The people are there to be inspired by you. So thank you for this time.
Francis, I'm going to say thank you to you for taking the time after commencement. You just finished the semester. You've been on a busy year with your co-chairing of the celebration. And this was a terrific hour that you helped moderate. So really thank you for your expertise and passion and helping make William Mary a better place for all of us. And we are excited to celebrate that. And to Chitra, Milan, and Franklin, thank you so much for doing this hour with us. We know you're very busy and keep writing, keep producing. We love your success and want to continue to follow and support you in your great ventures. For those of you joining us, we have one more of this great series that our colleague Craig Anzalon has helped establish. So if you're interested in getting more in the arts and entertainment, this is not going to be just a virtual thing. Franklin has already been a great leader in the LA area to help engage some of our alumni there. So stay in touch with us. We'll keep you engaged. We hope to have in-person events at some point in the fall or in the new year as well. So don't miss out on those and help share what you have ideas wise. If I want to also do a shout out to Ivana Marshall, who I said couldn't make it, who unfortunately had a conflict today, but really does send her regards to everyone and was so excited about this event, and wants to welcome you all. If you want to get more involved in the Asian Centennial that Francis is co-chairing and Ivana's on the committee, or in the William Mary APIM alumni group that we mentioned, she would love to hear from you. Ideas, literally IDEAS at wm.edu is the best email to reach her, as well as I want to let you know that there's a couple other events in addition to the June 24th Diverse Voices in Hollywood, which is going to be focused on young professionals. So quite fitting to the last section of questions that you just addressed. But on June 17th, we will do another APIM professionals event focused on celebrating and strengthening community. And that will be moderated by Senior Vice President of Human Resources for Comcast, alumnus Clem Chang, will be leading that group of alumni to discuss some of the APIM workplace strategies and so forth. So lots more to encourage you to attend. Go to wmalumni.com. Thank you all. We'll send out the recording to those that want to share it with their friends. Please share it widely, and hope to continue to engage this group throughout the year.